Baba Yaga. Deep in the forests of Eastern Europe, Baba Yaga is arguably the most iconic child-eating monster in all of Slavic folklore. A gaunt, iron-toothed hag who lives in a hut that stands and rotates on a pair of enormous chicken legs. She travels not on foot, but in a giant mortar, steering herself with a pestle while sweeping away her tracks with a birch broom, so no one can follow her path home. Children who wander too deep into the forest are her preferred prey. She kidnaps them, shoves them into her massive black oven, and roasts them alive. What makes her especially terrifying compared to most folklore monsters is that she can be negotiated with. Follow her rules exactly, answer her riddles correctly, and she might actually help you. Ignore her customs and you end up as dinner. The duality is the point. The forest will kill you if you don't know its rules, and so will she. Lamia. Lamia begins not as a monster, but as a woman, a Libyan queen, according to ancient Greek tradition, who caught the attention of Zeus. Here, furious at yet another of her husband's affairs, retaliated by killing all of Lamia's children. The grief and madness that followed transformed her into something barely recognizable, a creature obsessed with destroying what she could no longer have. She began stealing and devouring other people's children, wandering the ancient world with hollow eyes and an insatiable hunger. Later accounts describe her as half woman, half serpent, beautiful from the waist up and monstrous below. Aristotle reportedly referenced her as a nightmare figure used to frighten children, which tells you everything about how deeply embedded she was in the Greek imagination. She isn't just a monster, she's a portrait of grief curdled into something dangerous. Strix. The ancient Romans had a specific word for the thing that crawled through nursery windows at night. Strix. Described in Roman sources, including Pliny the Elder, as a screech owl of supernatural origin, the Strix fed exclusively on the blood and flesh of sleeping infants, slipping past lamps and locked doors to get to the most vulnerable possible victims. The creature later migrated into Slavic tradition as the Striga, where it took on a different but equally horrifying form, the reanimated corpse of a child born with two hearts or two souls, one of which refused to stay dead. Parents were instructed to drive a stake through the body before burial to prevent resurrection. The belief was serious enough that Charlemagne reportedly outlawed the punishment of people accused of being Striga, according to historical records, which suggests entire communities were acting on this fear. Jenny Greenteeth. In Lancashire and Cheshire in northern England, parents kept their children away from still ponds with a single warning: Jenny Greenteeth is waiting. She is an aquatic hag lurking just beneath the surface of stagnant water, identifiable by the carpet of greenweed that covers her favorite pools. She reaches up with long green fingers to drag children and the elderly underwater, drowning them and consuming them in the cold dark below. Folklorists have noted that Jenny almost certainly served a dual purpose. She was a genuine piece of local belief and also a highly effective child safety tool, because stagnant ponds covered in green algae are genuinely dangerous and difficult for a child to identify as a threat. A similar figure called Peg Powler haunts the River Tees in Yorkshire, suggesting the English had a whole network of waterway predators keeping children back from the edge. Iceland's most feared winter figure has nothing to do with St. Nicholas. Gryla is an enormous troll woman who descends from the mountains every winter specifically to hunt children, and she has been doing so since at least the 13th century, with references appearing in sources connected to the era of the Prose Edda. She carries a massive sack and fills it with children she deems naughty, hauling them back to her mountain home to boil and eat them. She travels with 13 sons, the Yule lads, and a giant black cat known as the Yule cat, which hunts anyone who didn't receive new clothing before Christmas. The Yule lads today hand out small gifts, but their original purpose was far less cheerful. In 1746, Icelandic authorities reportedly issued a decree banning parents from using Gryla to terrify their children, which confirms just how seriously people were wielding her name as a threat. Krampus. On the night of December 5th across the Alpine regions of Austria and Bavaria, St. Nicholas is not the only one making his rounds. Krampus arrives the same night, half goat, half demon, covered in matted black fur and draped in rusted chains that clank as he moves through the dark. His horns curve back dramatically, his tongue lolls to his chest, and on his back he carries either a sack or a basket. Good children get gifts from St. Nicholas the following morning. Children who misbehaved get beaten with birch branches by Krampus, and the worst offenders disappear entirely into that basket, dragged off to hell, or simply eaten. Towns across the region still hold events called Krampuslauf, where men in elaborate Krampus costumes parade through the streets in what is simultaneously a celebration and a warning. The church made multiple attempts to suppress the tradition, but Krampus proved remarkably difficult to kill. The Erlking. A father rides hard through a dark German forest, his sick son bundled against his chest. The child keeps grabbing at him, whispering that he sees something in the trees, a pale figure with a crown and a flowing robe, reaching out, making promises. The father sees only fog. By the time they reach safety, the boy is dead. Johann Wolfgang von Goethe published this scene as his poem Der Erlkönig in 1782, and Franz Schubert set it to music in 1815, but the Erlking himself predates both, rooted in Germanic and Scandinavian folklore as a shadow king of the forest or fairy realm who specifically targets children. He whispers, he beckons, he offers beautiful things, and when persuasion fails, he simply takes. Whether he is a genuine supernatural predator or a metaphor for fever and death, claiming the young is a question the tradition deliberately leaves unanswered. Black Anise. In the Dane Hills near Leicester, England, there is said to be a cave called Black Anice's Bower, and according to local folklore, she carved it out of solid rock using nothing but her iron claws. Black Anise herself is a blue-faced, single-eyed hag of terrifying proportions who emerges at night to snatch children and lambs. She eats the flesh and hangs the skins from a large oak tree outside her cave to dry, wearing them around herself like a grotesque decoration. Her howl carries for miles and functions as a warning. If you can hear it clearly, she is already close. Historians have debated whether she derives from a Celtic goddess, possibly Anu, though the documentation for this connection is thin. Most written records of Black Anise date to the 18th century and later, leaving her earlier origins genuinely murky, which somehow makes her worse. Nachzehrer. In northern Germany and the Silesian regions, the dead were not always trusted to stay quiet. The Nachzehrer was a specific kind of revenant, a corpse that continued to feed from within its own grave, chewing on its burial shroud and its own flesh while still buried. As it chewed, family members above ground would begin to sicken and die, one by one as if the grave itself was consuming them. In more active accounts, the Nachzehrer would crawl free entirely and attack children directly, draining their vitality. It was believed to arise from improper burial, suicide, or plague death. According to historical records of Silesian witch trials, communities took this threat seriously enough to exhume and examine corpses they suspected. One proposed solution, ringing the church bell, was said to destroy it, though the exact mechanism of why was never fully explained. Across a vast stretch of the world spanning Iran, Armenia, Turkey, and Afghanistan, a single demon has haunted the hours immediately following childbirth for centuries. The Al, sometimes spelled Ol or Hal, is a spirit with iron teeth and claws that specifically targets newborns and their mothers in the most vulnerable window imaginable, the moments right after birth. It steals the liver of the infant or the mother, causing swift death. In some Persian accounts, the owl carries a book listing the names of every pregnant woman, allowing it to plan its attacks. The protective measures were consistent across the region: iron objects placed beneath the mother's pillow, salt scattered at the threshold, fire kept burning through the night, and crucially, the new mother was never left alone. The belief was so widespread and so consistent that it functioned as a genuine postpartum safety protocol across cultures that had no other communication with each other. Aswang. The Philippines has produced no monster more feared or more widely discussed than the Aswang, an umbrella term for a class of shape-shifting predators that move through communities completely undetected. The child-hunting variant specializes in the unborn. It approaches a house at night, extends a long, thin, proboscis-like tongue through gaps in the floor, and uses it to reach a pregnant woman sleeping above, feeding on the fetus directly. Its feet are inverted, so its footprints point backward, making it nearly impossible to track. By day, it looks like an ordinary neighbor, often a woman, unremarkable and friendly. The tick-tick variant produces a loud ticking sound that grows paradoxically quieter as it gets closer, meaning silence is the real warning. Garlic, salt, and rattan are among the traditional wards, but the Aswang's greatest weapon has always been its perfect disguise. Manananggal. The Manananggal takes the Aswang concept and makes it anatomically specific in a way that is difficult to forget. By day, she is a beautiful woman. At night, she separates her own upper torso from her lower body, sprouts enormous leathery bat wings from her shoulder blades, and takes flight while her legs remain standing somewhere hidden. The upper half hunts pregnant women, hovering above rooftops and lowering a long tubular tongue through gaps in the ceiling to feed on the heart of a sleeping child, or a developing fetus. Her name translates roughly to one who separates itself, which is precise if nothing else. The way to kill her is straightforward in theory. Find the lower half before dawn and rub it with salt, ash, or garlic, preventing the two halves from rejoining. Trapped as a torso at sunrise, she dies. The legs just stay there. Rangda. In Balinese Hindu tradition, Rangda is not just a monster. She is a cosmic force, the queen of the Layaks, an army of child-eating witches, and the embodiment of death and chaos set against the protective lion-dragon spirit called the Barong. She is depicted with wild white hair that reaches the ground, a tongue that extends past her chin, clawed hands, and a face frozen in the ritual mask expression that has been used in Balinese ceremony for centuries. She feeds on children's corpses and is strongly associated with graveyards and plague. The Kelowna dance drama, still performed in Bali today, reenacts her eternal battle with the Barong, a performance that is considered spiritually active, not merely theatrical. Her ceremonial masks are treated as genuinely dangerous objects, requiring ritual neutralization before they can be stored, according to Balinese religious practice. Penanggalan. In Malay folklore, the Penanggalan is exactly what it sounds like once you hear the description. A flying severed head, still trailing its own stomach and intestines, glowing faintly green in the darkness as it drifts through open windows toward laboring mothers and newborns. It is almost exclusively a maternity predator, drawn to the blood and vulnerability of childbirth. According to tradition, it soaks its dangling organs in vinegar to shrink them small enough to retract back into its body by morning, resuming a normal human appearance. Midwives were historically suspected of being Penanggalan, since they had access to the moments of birth that the creature craved. The primary defense was thorny leaves placed around the birthing room. The hanging intestines would catch and tangle in the thorns, holding the creature long enough for dawn to arrive and force its retreat. Yaramayhew. Australian Aboriginal folklore produced a creature that is somehow both ridiculous-looking and profoundly disturbing in its mechanics. The Yaramayhew is a small red figure, approximately 4 feet tall, with an oversized head, no teeth whatsoever, and hands and feet lined with octopus-like suckers. It hides in fig trees and drops onto children passing beneath, using the suckers to drain their blood before swallowing them whole. This is where it gets strange. The child is not necessarily dead. The Yaramayhew regurgitates its victim, takes a nap, then swallows again. Each cycle leaves the child a little shorter and a little redder. After enough repetitions, the child stops being a child entirely and becomes another Yaramayhew. The creature's lack of teeth means it cannot chew, making it slower and more escapable than it sounds, but you have to know to run before it lands. Amit. Ancient Egypt gave death a gatekeeper and gave the unworthy dead something to genuinely fear. Amit waits in the Hall of Two Truths, a composite creature assembled from the 3 most dangerous animals known to ancient Egyptians: the head of a crocodile, the front half of a lion, and the rear half of a hippopotamus. When a soul arrives for judgment, Anubis weighs the heart against the feather of Maat, the feather of truth and balance. A heart heavier than the feather, burdened by sin and wrongdoing, goes directly into Amit's jaws. She is depicted in spell 125 of the Book of the Dead, crouching beside the scales, patient and permanent. A soul she consumes does not go to punishment or purgatory. It ceases to exist entirely, which the Egyptians considered a fate far worse than any afterlife suffering. Children who died judged poorly faced her too. Azi Dahaka. Persian mythology and Ferdowsi's Shahnameh record one of the longest and most methodical child-eating reigns in any tradition. Azi Dahaka, the tyrant king with 2 black serpents growing directly from his shoulders, one on each side, that must be fed a human brain every single day or they turn and devour him instead. His cooks, horrified, secretly substituted sheep brains where they could to reduce the death toll. But they could not save everyone. Young men and children were the primary victims, their skulls cracked open to satisfy the serpents on a daily schedule for what the Shahnameh describes as a 1,000-year reign. He was eventually defeated by the hero Feridun and imprisoned beneath Mount Damavand, chained inside the volcanic mountain rather than killed, because according to tradition, he cannot be killed yet. He waits there still, according to Persian eschatology, for the end of the world. La Llorona. Along rivers and waterways across Mexico and Latin America, people have reported for centuries hearing a woman wailing in the dark, and the rule everyone knows is this: the louder and closer the cry sounds, the safer you actually are. La Llorona, the weeping woman, drowned her own children in a river after being abandoned by their father, and she was condemned to wander the water's edge forever, crying for them. When she cannot find her own children, and she never can, she takes others. Children who wander near rivers at night are her preferred victims, dragged under without warning. Her cries described consistently as "Ay, mis hijos," "Oh, my children." Some scholars connect her to pre-conquest Aztec figures, including the goddess Xihuacoatl, and to one of the 12 omens said to have preceded the Spanish conquest. Whether her origins are pre-Columbian or colonial remains genuinely debated among historians. Cuco. El Coco, known also as the Cuco, the Coca, and a dozen regional variations, is one of the oldest and most geographically widespread bogeyman figures in the world, documented across Spain, Portugal, and every country shaped by Iberian culture. What makes it unusual among folklore monsters is that it has no fixed appearance. It is not a hag, not a serpent, not a demon with a specific face. It is whatever darkness happens to be in the room. A lullaby warning of its arrival: "Duérmete niño, duérmete ya, que viene el coco y te comerá," meaning "sleep now, child, sleep now, the coco comes and will eat you," has been sung by parents for centuries. Francisco Goya painted it in 1799, giving the shapeless thing one of its earliest fine art depictions. Its namelessness and formlessness are the point. You cannot prepare for what you cannot picture. Stickini. In Seminole tradition, the most dangerous thing in the world is often the person you already know. The Stickini is a witch who transforms at night by vomiting out all of her internal organs, leaving them to soak in a clay pot, and then taking the form of a great horned owl. In that form, she hunts sleeping humans, particularly children, tearing out and consuming their hearts before returning home, reassembling herself by swallowing the organs back before dawn. By daylight, she looks completely human and completely normal. The great horned owl's call is considered a death omen in Seminole tradition specifically because of this association. Killing the owl form does not kill the witch. You must find the organ pot and destroy it before she can reassemble. This is not ancient history. The Seminole are a living people, and this tradition remains part of their cultural understanding of the world. Nuckelavee. The Orkney Islands off the northern coast of Scotland produced what many folklorists consider the single most viscerally disturbing creature in British mythology. The Nuckelavee rises from the sea as a horse and rider figure fused into one continuous body, and it has no skin. None. Every muscle fiber, every black vein, every pulse of yellow-tinged blood is fully exposed and visible as it moves. Its single eye is described by 19th century Orcadian folklorist Walter Trail Dennison as being as wide as a dinner plate, red and fixed. Its breath is a pestilential vapor that withers crops and spreads disease across entire communities, used to flush weakened humans, particularly children, out into the open where it can run them down. The only protection is a freshwater stream which it cannot cross. Its origins in Orcadian oral tradition predate its written documentation significantly, which means it was frightening people long before anyone thought to write it down. If you want to see more, click the video on screen now.